Just going to dive in. I mean, I said a little bit about your bio. Code grad, ran for the Maine House of Representatives at 22, served a few terms there. You entered in the venture capital world a bit later before founding EverFi in 2008. So I want to ask you, was EverFi your first dipping the toe into entrepreneurship, or have you had entrepreneurial experiences before then? Is it kind of in your blood, or?
Yeah, I think it's questionable whether it's in my blood. We'll see how it all goes. But first of all, I'll come back to it. It is so good to be in Maine. I love this place. I arrived here and I drove up for a meeting up in Brunswick and turned around and came back down. I love this state so much, and I have an incredible amount of gratitude to this state and the people who live here. Probably the best time of my life, including the time that I'm having right now, was the time I spent in the legislature and the people that I got a chance to serve with, and literally got a chance to drive every corner of this state again and again and again, as Jess knows, with the likes of Steve Rowe and Saxel and those guys. So it is, I have deep love and gratitude for this place. So thank you for having me back. I'm humbled by it. My first entrepreneurial experience actually, I think technically happened up at Fort Andros Mill in kind of the border of Brunswick and Topsom. I worked for Newport Data, which was one of the first software companies in Maine, and I was a sales rep selling CD-ROM based software which tracked the bulk active pharmaceutical manufacturing of plants of companies in India and Sri Lanka and Tel Aviv, which was really amazing in that it showed you even then in the 1995, 96, 97 that you could build software in a place like an old abandoned mill in Maine and have that. And I would come in the morning at 4 in the morning and sell into Tel Aviv and call into Sri Lanka, and no one understood even remotely what I was talking about, including me.
For those who don't know, Newport was Jean Hoffman's first start.
Yeah.
She's the founder of Putney, who had a ginormous exit last year.
She was such a great leader, and that was a blast. So that was my first entrepreneurial experience. I layered onto that landscaping out in Harpswell and parts of the Bailey Island. And then, so I did that, and I did the legislature. Legislature was kind of my core thing, and it's amazing how you can live on, $4,000 a year as a 23-year-old guy eating ramen every night. And so I did that for 3 terms, and then I really was kind of ready to just change things up, and I decided not to run again. And really left with, people often ask me, like, why'd you leave? And I, 1, didn't think that anyone would ever elect me to anything else above that station, and 2, I was just kind of ready to, I did have kind of an entrepreneurial bug, and I didn't think that it made sense to get into politics at age 22 and never kind of have another job ever again. And so I did that, and then I got into venture capital, and I really wasn't that, we were joking about it, I really wasn't that good at that. I don't think that I was, I'm not sure that I come with hardware pre-installed to kind of either advise or invest in other people very well. Yeah. And I think my track record shows that. And I really felt like I wanted to kind of sink my teeth into something that was big and important and at a very big scale, and that's kind of what we've done today.
Yeah. When so I understand that you picked up some insights when you were in the legislature, worked on a laptop initiative.
Yep.
What from that period do you sort of keep with you today as you continue to build on?
So much. I tell people all the time, and everyone's always, no one ever believes it. I hold politicians in super high regard. I just think politicians are fantastic across the board, and I think what they have to put up with and deal with, and the fact that 90% of their time is spent helping people do the very little things in their life that are big to them and very difficult. So huge regard for politicians, number 1. Number 2 is I think if business people acted more like politicians, they'd be a lot better at their job. And so, just counter to probably what every human being on the planet would ever say, which of course doesn't make it right. But right or wrong, never in doubt, as I say all the time. The things that I learned there were this: the consensus building that it took to pass meaningful legislation, which meant that, if you remember back in the day when I got elected, I got elected in '94, it was the only fully evenly divided legislature, I think in the history of the country, it was at that time, where you had a 17-17-1 Senate, a 75-75-1 House, and an independent governor. So you literally couldn't lose a vote on a sewer district bill or you'd be, up the creek. And so that was really formative in the way that you had to have these natural constituencies, and then you just had to be able to go get people to convene around a big idea that may not necessarily be something that, one, they believe in, and two, think is very logical. And then be able to withstand a lot of criticism from all kinds of places that you don't even know where it's coming from. And I think one of the things that's happened in the tech world is, it's just it's a much more transparent world than the tech world that I came up in, or, Bob certainly, came up in, and where you've got Greek choruses all around you. And so you've got to be willing to kind of have great transparency all across the board. And I think it was a great proving ground for that. The last thing I'll say is the formative parts of EverFi all came from the legislature, which was, I thought that this school funding formula process, and we'll talk about what EverFi does, but I thought the school funding formula process was just was forever broken, would never ever be solved in a way that would treat kids in high poverty areas fairly, and it'll never be solved. So you can kind of, unless the Easter Bunny or somebody else comes along to do it, it's just a fundamentally, structurally broken system that has been engineered over. I always talk all the time, I just say, listen, particularly I work a ton in the Mississippi Delta. I just got back from Eastern Kentucky this morning in coal country down there. Spent time with J.D. Vance, who wrote Hillbilly Elegy. It's really cool. We were together yesterday. And there have been these systems that have been architected to keep, and this isn't meant to be a really provocative statement, it's just systems have been architected over 400 years in this country to keep particularly kids of color in high poverty areas very, very poor. And they've been really well thought out and constructed. And they involve payday lending industries, they involve voting, they involve voting restrictions, they just involve broken school funding formulas, equity, the lack of foundational elements around schools and in high income communities versus low, and they don't get me mad, or all of it is it's just more I just kind of see it in a matrix that says that's never going to get solved in a way that you could kind of put a circuit breaker in for kids generation over generation. And what EverFi's trying to do is actually jam a circuit breaker into Greenwood, Mississippi, or to Marks, Alabama, or Rosedale, Alabama, and these communities where there's incredible talent. Tim Cook grew up in Rosedale, Alabama. These are places that have incredible talent, and that came from the legislature of really seeing that from a math perspective.
Great opportunity for you to kind of tell us what EverFi does, especially in the context of one of those communities that you just brought up.
So one of the things that was fascinating about the legislature was, and by the way, thank you for listing this because no one ever cares about it anywhere else. Everyone's a really funny story. The other day, Bono is one of our big investors, and he pulled together. So we have a pretty incredible group of Bono and Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos, a really interesting group of, I name drop, I'm the best name dropper in history. But they brought President Obama to our board meeting the other day. And I kind of went around the room and I was like, let me tell my story about, so I walk in this room, it's 10 people, and President Obama's sitting across from me, and I have to go through our numbers and everything, And I said, so I was, they said, tell a little bit of your background, how you got into this. I said, well, I was a state legislator. I got elected when I was 22 or 23 or whatever. And I said, usually that's a really impressive story in a room of VCs and private equity guys, but today the president took a little air out of that one. The thing that happened in the legislature was there was a lot of great foundations that were doing a lot of very specific work in things like summer learning loss or the lack of financial literacy in schools, lack of student loan preparation, sexual violence, bullying, violence in schools. And so there were all these things that were outside of the core, right? So here we are kind of doing all this stuff, however you feel about teachers unions, charter schools, teaching to the test, race to the top like Common Core, whatever you feel about that stuff, there were these other things that to me were really striking. Like we announced a big program a couple of days ago in Harlem with the commissioner of Major League Baseball and Joe Torre and these guys and around summer learning loss. And that's a really interesting thing. So year after year after year, kids go home and they lose 38% of their math and word study and vocabulary skills over the course of the summer. So when they come back in, this wonderful teacher has to grab that student and work for about 90 days just to get them to where they were when they went off. And what the wonderful Einsteinish qualities of compounding affect a lot of different things, and they certainly, when you take a child and compound their reading degradation and math degradation over 2 or 3 summers, you can never catch them up. You can send them to MIT and you can never catch them up. And you certainly can't catch them up at scale. And so that's a great example. The lack of financial literacy, that you have students who are coming out of Tuskegee and Selma high schools, or the Passamaquoddy tribe, or wherever where you name your community, who don't know a thing about how mortgages work or credit works, what's the difference between an 80% interest rate and a 4% interest rate and what that does over time. And so what we decided to go after, there were these areas that we thought technology could be used to be put into the curriculum of local schools and teach kids that using social gaming and adaptive learning and animations and videos and lots of really cool stuff that we all take for granted, but usually bypass these tiny towns and large cities and everywhere else. And so that's what we do. Think about us as like, we build out a 20, 30-hour course on financial literacy, or we run the 2 largest courses in the world, and one of them is on sexual assault prevention. So you basically go to any college in the country, except my own alma mater. Except Bowdoin College. I was thinking we must have been just awful students there, because we've been rejected there like 6 times. The first 4 people at EverFi were all Bowdoin people, so I don't know what we did, but it wasn't good. But you can't go onto campus you can't get your dorm key at Harvard or Alabama or UC Berkeley or wherever without going through our course on sexual assault prevention, sexual violence, or alcohol responsibility and high-risk drinking. And so we're trying to do these things at a big scale. It's not all perfect, it's hard to do, often hard to measure, but it is truly in a vacuum of these issues ever being taught in these places.
So the business model though is a little different. You're not, I think the college things are a little different than when talking about high schools, and you're not selling to school districts. So tell us about the business model that you developed, which is a little bit unique.
Yeah, so the business model really is very unique. It occurred, the other thing that came out of the legislature when I kind of go back to the school funding issues is I was like, number one, there ain't ever gonna be money for this in, XYZ community. School budgets, you're never, and 2 is, I'm not going and standing in front of the West Des Moines School District asking for $30,000, because I'll get even more gray than I am today. And so what we decided was we needed to kind of bypass that funding mechanism. So what we did was we said, think about it like a 3-legged stool. EverFi builds the software that goes into schools, gets implemented in a district in Tigua, Texas, It is licensed and paid for, so EverFi builds it into the school district, and it's licensed by somebody else. And our customers, we have 4,000 of them, range from every single NFL, Major League Baseball, all the major sports leagues, NHL. It ranges from all of the major financial services companies, Bank of America, JP Morgan, others, to celebrities, to Intel, to Facebook, Airbnb, you name it. License the software, particularly for high, schools in high poverty density areas that have majority free and reduced lunch. So what it allows us to do is go to the school district and say, your end of the bargain in Bangor is to implement this, but Bangor Savings is paying for it all. And it's interesting in a couple of different ways. I think that the lack of, it's funny because here I am, this like liberal Democrat that, with a lot of impatience around the fact that I think if you think about the four mega kind of GDP driving issues in the country, energy, transportation, healthcare, and education being a big one. Those three, except for education, share one thing that the education sector doesn't, which is they all share a super thriving private sector that innovates on top of massive public infrastructure investment. So in energy, you've got transmission distribution lines and lots of subsidized, ratepayer funded projects and those things. And then you have like private sector companies that are just really innovating on top of that network. For some reason in schools, which is the thing that we all share in common as a true, like a public utility in the truest sense on every street corner, in every neighborhood in the country, we kind of had made this decision to both not invite and to devalue the private sector engagement around innovation in schools. And it's met with, and so what I really want, what we're trying to create is this like really thriving, massive, multi-billion-dollar funding mechanism that can fund innovation into schools that are never going to be able to afford it. And that's kind of a byproduct of how we build our model. Our college business and our corporate, we do a lot of corporate stuff that corporations just license for their own employees and stuff. That's just direct and kind of classic software, business, how that's run.
Your clients, is it all kind of a philanthropic decision on their part, or do you make a business case for why they should be?
Yeah. In many ways, they're already doing stuff in these communities. I mean, you all know how much, everyone from law firms to others are constantly, corporations are constantly investing in local communities.
Right.
So number one, it's not like a totally new idea. I think it's a new idea around digital innovation in education. And number two is, there's all kinds of ways they're looking at it. In some cases, there are regulatory reasons why they're going to want to do it. Banks, have lots of reasons under the Community Reinvestment Act and others want to invest in schools, and even, the sports leagues have these like enormous innovations that they have as part of community and stuff. So those are things that drive it.
Yeah.
When you were, so that's a curious business model. It seems like it's been pretty successful, but let's rewind. Right, I know there's some story about a big trip in a camper talking about this.
Yeah.
So those early meetings, right? You've got this, as you described, a very unique model. What was that like, those first folks?
Yeah, I mean, so the financial literacy thing, which is where we started the company, was really came from a really interesting experience. I mean, we had no money when we started the company. I mean, literally, I think we had $300 that we put in to start the business. And it was with two very good friends of mine from college. And we got in an RV. We made the decision that we were going to keep the company really small until we really knew what we were talking about. And then and so what we did was we got an RV and we drove across the country. I still think this thing is like in some hazmat zone somewhere, being fumigated. But we drove in this RV literally from Trenton, New Jersey, down all through the South and into Native American reservations, big cities, and until we got to California, and then we came back. But we just met with school districts and others really learning that. And that was it's kind of unbelievable. I was thinking, we've raised in the last 8 months $260 million, something like that, $250 million.
Last couple of years, not months.
Well, since last June, we raised $240 million since last June. So yeah, a little less than that. But we, I remember the night before. This is an absolutely true story. The night before we closed our Series A round, which was like with a real group, it was with NEA and Allen and Company and Eric Schmidt and others. I got to this hotel room. My credit card wouldn't work, and I called my co-founder and I said, "Hey man, can you call in your credit card into this cat at the front desk because he won't give me a room?" And he said, "The same thing just happened to me, and I can't help you." And so I begged the guy. He let me sleep in the lobby on a couch. And I got up and literally showered in the bathroom of this place, and then went. And we were just fully hand to mouth, and none of us had say. My partner Ray, who I started it with, Ray grew up, to his story is incredible. He grew up to a 15-year-old mother, and on food stamps, and the projects of Worcester, Mass, and so we didn't have anything to really fall back on, and so that that time was, I wouldn't trade that time for the world, but the thing that we always, and this is one of the things that Bezos really pushes a lot, which is that I think one of the things that certainly happens in ed tech, and it happens to a lot of us in technology companies, is we build the story for some kind of big event or monetization event down the road. And a lot of companies, one of the death knells of lots of companies is they don't focus on just kind of winning the day every day. And so we've really tried to just focus on just getting better and monetizing every day, looking back on a week and being wow, we're better at what we do than last week. There isn't some golden purse that sits out there where if we can just do that, someone's going to really value the company in a big way. And we've kind of systematically built the business that way. But it was always super fun, but it wasn't fun. If that makes any sense. It was not enjoyable for certain parts of it. And, and entrepreneurship, listen, I think, the way I tell people whenever, we were talking a little bit about it before, I've found that the better we've done, and this is not unique to us, the better we've done, and the more success, bigger we've done, more people we've hired, better, more sales that we've made, it's become, it's been interesting, is you almost have more confidence but less, and so you kind of have globally more confidence, but every day you're feeling, less secure, and you're feeling that they're just you have so many more customers, so many more employees. I always say all the time, we're unique in that we work with a lot of human beings, and you get 500, 600 people in your company. There's a lot going on, and so it's a really interesting. I've loved every minute of it, but it certainly had its ups and downs.
So in some ways, it seems like you've still got friends and family, right, involved in sort of senior leadership. Maybe this is not a great description, but in some ways you're also a chief evangelizer as you travel around. How do you push that down, right? As you're growing to the 500 and 600, how do you hire people? The values, right? In some ways, kind of easy, right? It's a story that a lot of people can attach themselves to. But then driving that in every piece of work that they do, how do you guys do that as an organization? How do you do it as a leader?
Yeah. So I think it's the most important thing that I have to do. So we just had our entire company offsite in the last 2 days. We did it in Eastern Kentucky. We did the last one in Montana on a Native American reservation, one before that in the Mississippi Delta. We try and take everybody to where we operate. So we flew 600 some odd people down to Kentucky. And what was fascinating is I asked our head of talent, I just said, can you pull the numbers of tenure? We've done some acquisitions, whatever, and it turned out that 83% of the people at our company had been there less than 2 years. 61.5% have been there less than a year. And so I really, that was a major wake-up call. And people have said this, that the culture thing, you just have to be all over that all the time. And so what we do is we have decided, like I made a decision really early in the company that we would just be hyper transparent. So at the end of every quarter, we have a town hall that, and I don't think this is rocket science, but it's always interesting how few people do this, because you hear a lot of companies who go out of business and stuff, and they're like, I didn't know we had 2 weeks of capital left, or I didn't know, we lost that customer. And so I just always wanted to go to bed at the end of every quarter and wake up the next quarter knowing that every single person in the company who worked across customer success to sales to finance or whatever knew everything that was going on. So our diversity numbers, our women in leadership numbers, our sales numbers, our margin, our unit economics, our revenue, how much money we have in the bank that afternoon, how much we're burning or not burning month to month, what we're being good at. So I think we all appreciate the fact that we feel like we're kind of all, like, listen, it's not I always say to people, listen, it's, let's have transparency, and then also my job is to break the 8-to-1 tie. Like, it's not a democracy at the end of the day. And it's not full open boat collective decision making, but that transparency means a lot to people. I also, when everybody starts, we fly them to DC in kind of chunks of like 40 or 50 or 60 people, and everyone sits in a room like this, and we go through like the things that we're like dead serious about it. We just say, listen, this company was founded on being positive, and so we reinforce something positive, which doesn't mean like you're upbeat all the time, and it doesn't mean that you have bluebirds flying around your head. It just means that you look at things with a sense that they can happen, that you can solve them. Second thing is, like, what kills companies is when you get some turds in it that talk behind each other's backs and close doors and whisper. And we make very clear that if you do that, you're out. Like, I don't care if you're the best salesperson we have, that you're gone, because that stuff kills you. And so those are the types of things that we bring people together and make that, really. And it's amazing how much people want to buy into that stuff. There's a lot of pressure to buy into positivity and stuff along those lines.
Yeah, sounds good. It's good work. And just to note, if people know the website Glassdoor, we were talking about this, but last year, Tom won an award for the highest rated CEO from Glassdoor. Well, so, we're talking about creating workplace culture and stuff. It seems like you come at it from a good place. So
I don't know what those.
I don't know what those guys are.
You got the vote out. We're gonna see if folks have questions throughout. We've got tons of questions.
Tons,
but does anyone have any questions?
Carrie, microphone on the way.
Back to me. Where am I going?
Tom, it's really interesting to learn about your company. One question I had was the impact of social impact funding, and do you think that getting to the scale would be possible without that type of funding versus a more traditional VC funding backing?
Yeah, that's. I'm really glad you asked that question, because it's been a really important kind of guiding force for us. And a lot of people get mad when I say what I'm about to say about socially responsible business and stuff. So first of all, when we started EverFi, we made a decision that we would do two things. We would never in the history of the company, and still haven't to this day, ever call it a socially responsible business or a social impact business. Even though everything we do every single day and every move we make is to fuel tons of social impact across the market. We literally spend 100% of our time trying to affect change in schools and communities and whatever. The reason why, and the second thing was, and then I'll come back to it, the second thing, the decision we made was that we weren't going to get social impact funding, until much later in the game, if we ever got it at all. So the first couple of rounds we did were just wonderful mercenary software rounds with New Enterprise Associates and Bezos is not a social impact investor, and Allen and Company or these others. And then this last round that we did with TPG and the Rise Fund and Bono and all these guys, which is really awesome, was so different in that it was two things. It was just such a big scale, and they wanted to put a lot of shoulder against it. It had the four kind of network builders in it that I really admired. So it had Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn, and Jeff Weiner is on our board, who's the CEO of LinkedIn, and Pierre Midyar from eBay, and these other two who had built really amazing networks. Ev Williams from Twitter, and the network building piece was super important to us. So that was a big driver of it. Now going back to the social impact side, the reason why I never wanted to be labeled that, or more importantly, let ourselves label ourselves that, was because and a lot of people totally disagree with me on this, so I was caveat, but I think it's like one of the great crutches for social impact businesses. This is what I hear when somebody gets up and says, we are giving 10% of our profits back to the community. We are giving X away for everyone we sell. All I hear is, I'm sorry that we're trying to make money doing this. I'm sorry that we're doing this as a company and not a 501c3. And that really is just totally counter to everything that I'm trying to prove with this, or we're trying to prove, which is that, if you just take kind of venture bets and capital and building companies, we carry people out on shoulders every day for creating like server virtualization companies or messaging apps or things like that. And for some reason we don't feel like, we don't give people the permission to, I think, and praise people and encourage people to build companies around solving problems that are socially based. I think what we do is we create all kinds of things that are, it's a company, but ... Yeah, it's a company, but ... And so that was just a decision I made. It has no judgment whatsoever on how anybody else, even though I think I just judged everybody in the social impact space. It has no, it's really more like we wanted to create a software company that was only measured at the end of the day. We measure all of our impact pieces. We do control studies. We do full-blown third-party, placebo studies and assessments on our products, and we do that. And we also said we want to build a best-in-class software business that has top-level net revenue retention, renewal rates, growth, margin, so that it can be a public standalone business that's sustained one. What we're trying to do is contractually obligate the biggest companies in the world to solve problems in their communities. You're going to see us go into recidivism, police relations into communities, more into sexual violence, prevention. You're going to see us go into these areas. What I'm trying to create is a company that has $1 billion of revenue every year, so that it that revenue is just feeding these answers from a data perspective and comparative analytics perspective. And I want to build a company that does that and not rely on anything other than contractually obligating people to pay for that. No donations, no 501c3s. And it's a big lift. I mean, no one's ever done it before, so it's certainly an intimidating lift. That's how I think about it.
How are you doing, Tom? So a lot of the work that you do works with communities that aren't particularly trusting of public or private sector institutions. So be awesome if you could talk a bit about your background and educational experience in helping kind of work with those communities, and then also where do you look for talent acquisition in order to gain employees to help you go into those communities and like bridge those gaps and build trust and things like that.
Such a good question. So my passion has been, where we kind of pointed we wanted to have true diversity in the first couple of hundred communities that we launched, which meant that we wanted to be in Greenwich and Darien, Connecticut, but we also wanted to be in Selma and Tuskegee and East Baton Rouge Parish and St. Tammany Parish and Native American reservations. We wanted to be able to say, hey, we operate in like massive aircraft carrier or LA Unified School District and also in tiny towns. I think that there is such a thirst for, I think that the one guiding principle that connects all of those communities, which are wildly different, Small towns in Iowa and Nebraska are night and day to a large urban district to a small, town in Alabama. So it's a recognition of the economy that's there. It's a recognition of the communities that are there, the histories that are there. And so one of the things that I've found, though, is how welcoming. I've been surprised by this, of just how incredibly welcoming and almost thirsting parents and teachers are in these communities for more resources and the types of things that communities who aren't in high density poverty areas get and they don't. So it's been a much easier implementation cycle, for lack of a better word, than I would have ever thought. And that doesn't mean you don't run into areas of, our play is, can we convince parents and teachers? So to specifically answer your question, what's interesting is we have about 200 former full-time teachers who work at the company full-time, and they're in the communities. They live in Jackson, Mississippi, or they live in Minneapolis, or wherever we're operating. And they've got a grouping of about 350 schools they work with, and they just go 365 days a year and work with those teachers. And the street cred of not crop dusting those communities, but really farming and getting your hands, dirty in the communities and helping teachers and driving school to school and knowing the streets is really important. It's something I think other ed tech companies miss. It's expensive, but it's worth it. And the other thing is I get down on my knees and thank God every night for like Wendy Kopp at Teach for America, because and NEA and AFT and teachers unions who are an incredible pipeline for us, frankly, who, it's just such credibility for someone who says, I've been in the classrooms for 7 years, and they're going teacher to teacher. And that's where we get a lot of our pipeline from, on this schools piece. The most challenging thing that anybody will tell you, and it's here and everywhere else, is it is just brutal from an engineering and product perspective. Just brutal. And it's competitive, and it's tough to keep folks. And so that is not an area we've done a very good job of our pipeline, and certainly our diversity pipeline and other things are very hard there. It's a big cop out that all of us take all the time. And so we can't figure it out or whatever. There's ways to figure it out, but those are the challenging parts of what we do. And I think we're trying to make it so. I'm trying to convince people to be at EverFi for like 15 years, and that's because I think like anything real takes 20, 25 years to build from a company perspective. And companies that I admire that have really done it right, I think you can have flash in the pans that happen 9 years or 10 years, but I just think it takes in the long run, it's a 20-year process. And so we're trying to get people to stay for a long time and are kind of in. And usually that comes from a place of passion or experience.
As you've been building the company, what's the biggest mistake you made?
Yeah, there's how long
you can do 3.
Yeah, how long do we have? Yeah. So I can think of a number, but I'll just rattle some off. Number one was we didn't hire like a really, really solid software CTO early enough. And so what it did was it kind of we had a lot of folks who, and I was clueless because I'm not a engineering CEO. So I really honestly couldn't tell you. Get in there and get underneath the hood. And when NEA and others came in, they diligenced it pretty heavily. So number one is you kind of, by getting maybe some weakness along the way in that category, you build up a lot of technical debt, and you've got to go back and kind of we're going back to that. We're going back to platform issues first. I thought we were way down the road on data and analytics, and so that's number one. Number two is I'm going to criticize us, so take the first part as complimenting myself with a grain of salt. We have done an extraordinary job of really, really finding incredible women leaders. Our majority of our management teams, management team are women. all of the major operating roles in the company, chief revenue officer, COO, chief product officer, run by women. We're a 58% women company. We have not now. That's great. And I'm proud of that. We should do that. It should be reflective of the country. We are not reflective of, now, we really are best in class on employees of color and diversity. Best in class, like 5% or something area, but still, we bombed on that early on. And what I tell people all the time when they're starting the company is like, I really think you win or lose that right out of the gate. You either are focused on it and attentive to it, and like everything else, it takes a lot to catch up on that. And I was really bummed out. And we developed some systems that, and I'll tell you, this is fascinating. I walked in one day and I said, can you pull, I want to just do the salary comparisons of employees of color with, with similar positions. And we did it all across the board, and man, that is a really humbling experience. And I went and I told 20 of my other CEO friends to go do that, and it was a very humbling experience. And every CEO I ever talk to, I say, you've got to go audit that. And thus we've created some systems that took us some time to figure out how to make sure, because this whole unconscious bias thing within technology companies, it's everywhere, but it's the real deal in technology companies. And you see it with Uber and you see it with lots of companies now, but even companies like EverFi, who I think are just so on offense on it, you cannot audit it and focus on it enough. And I mean audit it, not get up and like rah-rah in a session, but like look at your numbers every month, look at your pipeline, look at your applicants, look at what you're paying people. And I literally needed to like go get drunk when I first did that. And it made me really angry at myself. And but over 3 years we've done I think a really good job of and you can't kill yourself on this stuff. You got to like get better at it, and I think the industry needs to get better. So those are the types of things that I'm very aware of now. And I think the last thing is that I continue to do really poorly is there's this line that was really good, which was kind of feed the eagles and starve the turkeys. And you spend a lot of time, you never feed your eagles enough at your company. And that developing that level of the next generation of leaders of the company. So if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, that the company would be able to pull off the extraordinary things that you want, are really important. Those are really important things to do, and we're not doing that well enough. So we announced something that's like a hardcore development, program for kind of 12 people a year to just intensely build their personal networks and kind of really play at the level we need them to play at. So those are 3, and there's 50 more.
I'm a mom, and I just have a wish list or hope that this is on your radar of things, world problems to solve. But there's been 4 suicides at my kid's school, and we all know about the glamorization of suicide and social media. I went to the Facebook page of that show, and there wasn't one, suicide hotline, nothing. It was all about the glamorization of suicide. I'm just wondering, hoping that's on your sort of radar of social problems to solve.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought it up. There's this mix of issues. So we went very, very heavy into sexual assault and sexual violence prevention, alcohol responsibility and high-risk drinking. Then we went down into this area of what I would call digital citizenship. And this is like, none of us had to deal with this stuff when we were all coming. And so, you're really talking about, you might as well be talking about languages you don't understand. And So a couple different things. We built a course called Healthy Relation. It's called Character Playbook, and it has a lot of those elements. And it's not specific to suicide kind of yet, but it walks up right to the edge of the water on it in terms of online bullying, anonymized bullying, a lot of those issues that are they are. The bathroom stall has just come to life in the schools, and it is viral and it is mean, and so we're trying to figure out. It's interesting. We built lots of very interesting simulations based on our research around what they call bystander intervention with rape and sexual assault in schools. Similar, kind of deploying similar tactics against this, which eventually leads to a lot of issues around suicides in schools and the growing issue around that. It's also heavily tied in a lot of places to the opioid epidemic. So we're launching a new network on very specific to opioid prevention, is why we were frankly in Eastern Kentucky. And if you can read JD's book, it was with us all day yesterday, it's actually very interesting. If you can, there's some politics associated with it, but Hillbilly Elegy is about, about suicide and, crime and everything that comes from where he grew up and the issues around prescription drug abuse. And so it's big, it's big for us. It's tragic, and we're going to try, like the digital citizenship stuff is crazy. I told people the other day, I said, I was in a classroom the other day of 200 kids who were high schoolers. I said, how many of you use email? And like 3 hands went up. And so we've got to be on offense of understanding how students are accessing these things, because it really is change. If I kind of walk in and I'm like, I'll think I'm cool. I'll be like, are you on Messenger and Snap? They're like, we haven't used that in like 3 years, and I'm on Last FM and Quick and whatever, and you're just so it's it is rapidly changing.
What platform, just to follow up, what platform is your technology? Is it all just laptop, desktop, or do you have?
It's mobile, but it's more and more mobile oriented. Yeah, so it's enabled across. You can move it across any device, and it's built on Android. It's built on, it's hosted on AWS. It's
like native app.
Yeah. Almost all. They're all built on one platform we call Foundry. It's our own platform, and it serves up all the analytics and what we call adaptive pathing, which is a lot of this stuff is really cool because it. For the first time, I talk a lot, just to sidebar on that for a second, is I talk a lot about the time machine test in education. And the time machine test is that if you went back and you looked at energy distribution and transmission, or you looked at a heart surgery, or you looked at the way a car was constructed, whatever, you went back 100 years, it just looked totally different. If you go to the average classroom in America, it actually looks very much the same. You've got a blackboard and a teacher and 40 students. And I think the thing that's really exciting about technology and education technology is that for the first time you're actually being able to give teachers who are extraordinary. These teachers are, they are left to basically raise the child. And these kids come to school pre-installed with hunger and violent family backgrounds and like all kinds of things. There's no way you can treat all 40 of those students the same way. And the learning process shouldn't treat them all the same way, but it's very unfair to think that a teacher could kind of play across 40 students in 3 classes, and so what's cool about technology is you're doing these things like flipping the classroom. You're actually able to allow students to go do the lessons at night at home, and then let the teachers come in and kind of reinforce student by student the various areas that are needed. And not just have a teacher have to stand up and kind of present problem sets to every kid in the room, and that kid's starving, and that kid was abused last night, and that kid, didn't have a good teacher last year that didn't get them up to speed. And so it's really, really like we're years away from it, but it's really exciting stuff. This and allowing students to move and change, like our stuff adjusts for language patterns and ESL patterns, and the benefit of having such a big network is our technology says, wow, this child in Mississippi kind of learned when you served him that pitch on this and that pitch on this, and maybe that'll apply to this child. and it allows you to do some really interesting things that there's just an incredible amount of promise in it.
Hi. You're clearly driven by personal values, and you started your company by going out there and selling your own vision. So I'm curious, the lessons that you've learned infusing your personal identity into the company, areas where you wish you had maybe restrained yourself more, and areas where you wish maybe you had pushed harder.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so here's kind of how many in here are entrepreneurs? Yeah, it's awesome. So this has been the greatest experience of my life in so many ways. Like besides and that's saying a lot because the legislature was just an incredible experience. Listen, I go back, I've got 4 little kids, and I've been on the road 27 of the last 30 days, sleeping in a hotel room. So it's there's a ridiculous cost to it, and I'm kind of eyes wide open about that right now, and so I am constantly trying to figure that out of how to change that up, and what I think that in order to, I'm really, it's not, and Bob's built amazing companies, but much bigger than mine for sure, but it's kind of shocking to me to see what it takes to really build a fairly big enterprise. And so I'm really grateful for it. I'm aware that it has a cost, and it certainly has a cost to a lot of your personal relationships in your life, because I'm thinking about it and doing it 20 hours a day. I'm just constantly on my mind and figuring out that balance of having it kind of work into your life, and times when it can't work into your life, and I've never known anybody who's totally nailed that. But what I'll tell you is this. My opinion as a one-time CEO, it sure as hell better be something that you're ready to go run your head through a brick wall for. It shouldn't be something that you dabble with. You should be pretty passionate about it, unless you're just making a decision to kind of. There's no rule that says. I always tell people all the time. There's no rule that says you've got to. Technology companies, we put so much pressure on ourselves to build big companies. And it's not like your friend starts a shoe store and you're like, when are you going to become Saks? When are you going to become Neiman's? Like, when is that going to happen? And you can build awesome $300,000, $200,000, $50,000 revenue software businesses. Just don't go get venture capital from them, so that's. I'm not sure if that totally answered your question, but I'm very personally driven by the mission of the company, and I have an incredible amount of loyalty to the folks that I work with every day, and thus it puts pressure on me. I constantly feel like I need to be leading, very much, from how do you, you never let them figure out who the general is, says you work like a soldier or whatever it is that I really take that to heart.
Hi, I'm curious if you have any obstacles that you're facing. I mean, it sounds like this idea is really incredible, but I'm wondering if you're running into other brick walls besides the one that you could run into yourself. Like, do you have teachers who are upset with you about this? Do you have community members? Are there parts of legislature that you're running up against? Because it seems like a great idea, but it's also a huge idea. Yeah. So I'm curious about the obstacles to success that you are facing.
Yeah, great question. So I would say they're kind of more own goals, like in soccer when you score a goal on your own team. Usually it is that we've stepped on it with customers that have rippling effects or whatever. There isn't kind of fully formed legislative, one way or the other, pro or anti ed tech that's kind of taken off across the country that we're certainly very, very careful with student privacy and these issues, and those are kind of being discussed everywhere, and they should be. We are also, I think that it's really more the balance of obstacles of the biggest obstacle I'd say is this. We've made a decision to be a multi-headed monster of, being in financial literacy and bullying and sexual assault and summer learning loss and opioid prevention and so we're trying to do this, and these are $1 trillion spaces, some of them. Thus, when people ask me all the time, who are your competitors? Like, who are you running up against? I'm like, well, pick which vertical, because I've got them in every vertical. And so if you say financial literacy, I'm running into junior achievement. And it's always, if it's bullying and digital citizenship, it's common sense media. And the worst thing about it is it's always like some incredibly wonderful nonprofit that's like nicer than we are and been around for and so I have to walk in and be like, oh, screw those people trying to help those kids and, for 100 years, screw those guys. So we are back to the impact question. I mean, we are in impact spaces and the province of nonprofits and public sector all around the wheel. And so everywhere we go, they're like, we've been working with, the National Sexual Violence Hotline for, 20 years, and why would we switch to you in these places? And so those are very big obstacles. And we're the one company that you can't get a donation, a 501c3, so we're at even a more disadvantage when we're going in and competing. Our model is awful. Like, our business is awful. Like, don't ever try and do it. But somehow it's totally working. But I'm not sure quite how, because it's in the sum of its parts, the whole of its parts. It's great. And if you did any one of them on your own, you'd think we needed to have brain transplant.
But it's funny, that is part of, that's right, you're sitting next to the sentences solve better. Some of the thoughts when we were putting together this conference is exactly that, which is, a lot of the work in solving problems sometimes creates systems and perpetuating trying to solve that problem versus just solve that problem. It doesn't mean they're bad actors, doesn't mean they're bad organizations, but we use the joke sometimes about the first person to ever talk about trying to recruit young people back to Maine was Joshua Chamberlain in his second inaugural address. And we're still talking about that. Mm-hmm. So there's got to be a way to solve this stuff, in a variety of situations. So I think perhaps certainly in this conference and sort of the work we're trying to do is opening people up to using innovation and testing technology, even just as an enabling tool to solve some of these things. So hopefully you'll just change all of that for us.
Yeah.
So actually to that point, my question is, can you talk about your product development? And these are big, thorny questions. How do you create a digital experience that helps people with bullying or all the, some of the other kind of things that you talked about? How do you innovate in that? How do you get the insights? How do you kind of solve that problem?
Yeah. So the quick answer is on it. We've developed one platform that we think has a lot of, that has the necessary pieces, we're not done with it, but that has a lot of the necessary pieces to serve all the verticals. So it has the ability to kind of pull behavioral data and analytics from it. It has ability to serve up surveys in platform. It has the ability to obviously create content in an interesting way. So the kind of underlying just pure technology, forget the content and the subject matter expertise that sits atop it. Then you start plugging in the content on top of it, the best ways to learn. And those are very different depending on the age of the child or the student and what course it will be going into. So what science shows you is that summer learning loss is actually done really well in short bursts and multiple short bursts, and that the way you affect, for example, financial education is by building, a training experience and then booster shots along the way, and to have learning at the moment of the choice of like a financial moment. You're buying a house or whatever, like you need learning at that moment. And so the way you construct these things of the content side is different, but the underlying technology is roughly the same that serves it all up. Then you get to the point of, who cares what EverFi says about this, and why do you think you're an expert? And we really have to go outside of our walls to do that. So like when we did civics, we teamed with Sandra Day O'Connor, to do that. And when we did sexual assault prevention, we teamed with Alan Berkowitz and Bill Jeong, who are the two best minds, and and have done 40 years of research and guidance of how to teach bystander intervention. And then what we do is we take that and basically, depending on, we're just replacing like traditional front of the classroom or RA instruction with more gamified, more interesting, more mobile oriented learning around that. And that is all user design and UX design, and we've got a whole team of people who are really good, not just at UX UI, but at UX UI as it relates to STEM or relates to teaching, research-driven efficacy within one of those things. And it's different in every single category. I mean, nobody cares what Alan Berkowitz says about financial literacy. We got to go get the experts. So when we launched our African American history, it was really around kind of grit and resilience and these areas. It was with Clay Carson, who's the official biographer for the King family. He runs the Center for African American History at Stanford. He's like, unimpeachably incredible on building out how you tie these areas to kind of grit and resiliency.
So you talked a little bit about your sort of complex business model, sort of non-traditional business model. One of the questions that was asked in some of the entrepreneur training here a while ago, one of my favorite questions, is a lot of people focus on what goes wrong, and they spend a lot of time analyzing that, and not enough people spend enough time analyzing why they succeeded so that they can get more of it. And it seems like you've really done that in terms of being able to go in with this complex business model and then going after additional verticals. Can you talk a little bit about how you know you succeeded and then were able to replicate that?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, what was good was we really operated, for example, in financial literacy for a number of years before we went into high-risk drinking, which was a very different thing. We knew we wanted a college network, so we actually bought a pretty big, one of the biggest college businesses, and we were like 10 people and they were 50 or 60 people, and we bought them, and then we built the sexual assault prevention course on top of that. So it was kind of a couple of different things, which is our measures were always scale was certainly one of them, that you could have a product market fit that actually solved some problems. You can measure that it changed behavior along the way in most of them. And then we now have gotten, it's funny, I sat through an hour-and-a-half session yesterday of how we think of these as networks. And so we think of them as either you're in or you're out. You're either in, we call it the Campus Prevention Network. That's 1,750 universities across the country that are all buying into the same solution. We think there's great benefit and utility to that. We've taken that network and done it in financial services. We're about to launch it in opioid. We're about to launch it in summer learning loss. We actually know what kind of a network, in our opinion, because no one's ever done, it's kind of like who did the third-party funded payer system around behavioral change in problem sets. No one's ever done it before, and so we're kind of building the plan. We, as Reid Hoffman said to me, he said, "Listen, you got to jump off the cliff and then begin to construct the plan." And that's kind of what we've had to do over time. But I think we've got a pretty good idea. If you told me to go around the wheel of those 15 areas, I can kind of guide you, I think, to the network and the product and what we would measure on most of them, I think, at this point.
Hi. Your approach is really transforming teachers as content delivery systems to teachers as coaches and mentors. And I was wondering if you could talk to the key messages you use to persuade those that are really invested in the traditional model of teaching and learning.
Yeah. Very good question. I mean, I can't emphasize how important teachers are to this mix. There's a bit of a false narrative that goes on. There's a bit of a false narrative with ed tech that it's somehow replacement oriented or teachers fear it. We never see teachers who fear technology ever. I want to say we have 35,000 teachers that are core kind of power users of EverFi. We never see a whole lot of fear or anxiety. I think what they want is it to be explained, and that they don't want to have to go in their incredibly busy schedule to have to go harvest the parts of the internet for answers to some of these things. So one of the things we're trying to do is, like, if a teacher says, I really want my children in poverty, who are 90% of them in my classroom are on free and reduced lunch, I want them to go through a really rigorous financial literacy program so that they at least leave or drop out of school with this knowledge by the time that happens, and either go to college or don't go to college with this core understanding of the concepts around finance. And they don't want to have to go harvest Motley Fool and Yahoo Finance and every other Susie Orman to figure this out. So I think what they want is, it's not to be simplified or dumbed down. They just want like a turnkey answer for something that's non-core. You know what I'm saying? And I think what you're really seeing now is teachers using lots of the platforms, some of Remind, Class Dojo, Edmodo, these platforms that are totally transforming the way teachers communicate with parents, that they nudge kids on homework, that they manage their classroom around and create reward systems. That's becoming all technology driven, which is really cool. And it's really, the jury's still out on how, whether it all truly works at the end of the day, but it's really fascinating. It's being done at a massive scale. I mean, you have millions of kids on those platforms. So,
I think we have time for one more question.
Bob?
Yeah, Bob.
You haven't mentioned the verticals. Maybe it's accidental, but you haven't mentioned verticals like calculus, and physics, and chemistry, and like reading, writing,
Yep.
arithmetic. Is it you don't do them yet, or did you just fail to mention them?
Yeah, great question. My sense is we won't do them. My sense is that we want to pick fights that nobody's paying attention to, and that there's a lot of people that are focused on those. Whether they're doing them well or not is another thing. But the big publishers, there's $33 billion a year going into the content creation around core subjects, and we think that that's funded and institutionalized, and they need to do it better. But probably won't be our gig. We'll probably say, what's the area around recidivism and police and community relations that we want to build a platform to go after. We'll probably seek out problems that we know affect students in schools. And we're thinking about all kinds of stuff, violence, hunger. We're thinking about how we can, use our solution to kind of wrap around some of those issues in whatever way we could affect them. So I bet you it'll be years before we go into the core of what a school, is focused on. Maybe a bad business decision, but we also think it's a big white space over. I use the summer learning loss example as a great one. It's probably the closest because it is math, reading, reinforcement. It is what a fourth grader will do over the course of a year. It's just they don't do it over the summer, and it just call it the summer slide. Just goes off a cliff. That's a close thing, but it's done in a way that we think there's a big white space that no one's paying attention to in summer.
So apparently we're actually going to 4:45, so I misspoke. We do have more time for more questions. Liza.
Love that you name drop, and I was wondering how you got to the point where you could, open those doors, or how did you get those first doors open? I guess now that you have them open, I'm sure like others. But how did you get those first? How did you get that first funding round? How did you get those first, people on board?
Yeah, I have too many drawbacks as an entrepreneur to even mention, but one of the things that I just have always been pretty good at is figuring my way to get to people and to use networks to figure out a way to get to them. I think a lot of it came from running for office. Up here was you just had to figure out a way to convince, and I was so young when I did that. I felt like I just had to convince people to do things that they wouldn't normally do, like elect a clueless 22-year-old. And so there were two things that I knew that and I'll tell you specifically how I did it, but I literally went up to Jeff Bezos at a conference and just said, we're working on something really big and important. And I, over time, as we got Eric Schmidt and these people, I employed this tactic that I think is actually a very good tactic to do this. and which is we befriended, probably a group of like 50 or 60 CEOs, most of whom became customers of ours. So they were actually customers to start with. And so it would be a Jamie Dimon or a Ken Chenault from Amex or something. And like we got to Chenault because he was a Bowdoin guy. And we use this topic here, we use this thing called the ricochet effect. And it started because I would say to somebody like Jamie Dimon, who was super helpful to us when we got going, I would say, Jamie, can I get you to send, Bob Metcalf a email and make an introduction to me? And what you don't realize is actually how hard that is to get done with Jamie Dimon's office. Somebody calls you and he says, yeah, call, Jim in my office. Jim, you missed Jim 6 times. And you call Jim, and Jim says, do me a favor, just write up exactly what you want Jamie to send it to me. And I'll take a look at it. You send it to him, and you're in week 3 now, and then he writes back and says, I gotta just get with Jamie, make sure he's okay with this, and we'll send a line. By the time that's over, you're a month and a half in, right? So what I started doing was, I just would sit in I'd go take a meeting with somebody like that, and I would say, hey, do you know Bob Metcalf? And he'd say, yeah, I know him super well from Maine. And I'd say, do you mind if I just call him and just tell him that you said I could give him a ring? And he said, yeah, sure. And the answer was always, yeah, just talk, of course. And so I would call Bob Metcalf and I'd say, Bob, Jamie really wants you to meet with me. Like really wants to see this happen. And so we would, we would do that and all the time. But this idea of ricocheting, like how do you ricochet off somebody and get somewhere else? And it was hugely effective. And so that's like the tactic. And then the why, I think, is that our group of folks is an extraordinary group of people, and they're very real. Like Lorene Jobs is a wonderful investor and supporter of ours, and she has been in these issues knee deep for years in education. And like Ev Williams is super passionate about these issues. And so you're not trying to convince them, and I think the key is they realize that they want a major horse in education, and they want to do stuff at scale. I mean, all of these folks across the board have no interest in me, I think, being in a $2 million a year school, education company that, works with 10,000 students. Like these are scale. These are people who buy Whole Foods. Literally. Why, we don't know yet. Maybe one more? Yeah.
If you were starting an educational technology company today, what would you focus on?
A different company?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were starting something new.
I actually know exactly what the answer to that is. And it involves, I'm really interested in the idea of mentorship and how you just dump kerosene on the idea of mentorship. And it's interesting. I'll tell you a story about a guy I work super closely with every day. And the first time I ever took him out to lunch, he's much younger than I am. He's probably 25, super talented. He comes from a family of 9 kids in Virginia Beach, and single mom. And he said, and I said, what are you doing this weekend? He said, my brother's getting out of jail, and so we're bringing him back home, and we're trying, like, he's gonna move in with me, and I said, how old is he? He's like, he's a year older than me, and I go, and what was your track again? He had just started working for us. He said, I went to Dartmouth, and then to Goldman, and my little brother went to Williams, and then he went to Fidelity, and he's like a senior. I'm like, all right, well, walk me through how that happened. You grew up on full-blown free and reduced lunch, schools your entire time. Your family was on, on all of the assistance programs we hear about. And he said, it was that I had one guy who became a big brother to me. And when everyone else in my family, went off the rails, he just, he goes, he didn't even do anything major for me. He was the only person in my life that ever did what he said he was going to do. He showed up. He said he was going to be there at 3 o'clock on Saturday. He showed up at 3 o'clock on Saturday. And I hear that everywhere from people who said, people taking an interest in my life and giving me access. So I've got an idea that's rattling around in my head that I can't get out of my head right now, of moving the conversation from skills to access. And it's kind of a controversial thing because we're spending, like just being in Kentucky yesterday, I mean, there's been $1 trillion spent in Eastern Kentucky since the New Deal. And, and the needle has barely been moved anywhere in Perry County or Hazard, Kentucky or anywhere. And so, you start to think about things like access points, like how do you give someone, so this guy in particular who is just a stud, his mentor had gone to Dartmouth and he said, I'm just gonna drive you to Dartmouth and I'm gonna introduce you to everybody at Dartmouth. And sure enough, that kid was at Dartmouth 3 years later, and he just it made him think differently, it made him believe in the possibility of it. And so I'm trying to figure out mentorship at a massive scale. And so that's, I think, gonna be our next play, is how you take kids in rural Mississippi and wrap them with so many people around them that they literally have access points into internships and jobs and opportunity and test prep and all these things in such a way that it literally makes it impossible for them not to at least get an opportunity. And we hire a ton of kids. The guy who's also a Bowdoin grad, interestingly enough, Gerald Trutavian, who started Year Up, I mean, there's a 60-minute special on him, what he's done. Basically, the idea is how do you take what Gerald's done, which is the most heroic thing I've ever seen in education, and do that across 1 million kids. And that's, more to come on that. But and the fun thing about where we sit right now is we have unlimited resources behind EverFi now to do that. If we can figure out, it's a question of if we can figure out the problem, the right answer to those problems and have it and not blow it. That's what we're trying to figure out. So if I was going to start anything, it would be around that idea.
Sounds like you're ready to start.
Maybe so.
Mike, you had a question? If you want to slip one in, if you have.
Sure. It was sort of answered, I think.
Okay.
But I'll slip it in. There's so many companies in the space, content delivery, ed tech. I think Bob sort of started hitting when he asked the question, you're not teaching calculus. Is it because you are focused on the content you're focused on that you're able to grow so big and be so influential?
I think that, I think we're, what I would say is we're far from careful people. I mean, we're all over the place, but I think that we're careful on the fights we pick or the things all I want to do is win at whatever we decide to put our mind to. And I think you can construct a very interesting company by going where they ain't. And that's been really, we'll do $100+ million in recurring revenue this year by just, constructing these areas that are kind of outside the core. Now, I say all the time, I saw the other day, Asbury Park, New Jersey, signed a $3.7 million deal for content around just, it was chemistry, it was a content play specifically within sciences. And I was like, man, I'd love to be able to get my arms around that, because I think the big publishers, Pearson and McGraw-Hill, I don't think it's going to come from them. I don't think the answer is going to come from those guys. And they're sitting on a really big market. So someone will go take them out. I've been surprised nobody's done it.
Right. It's interesting, you've been kind of on the education technology all the way from the laptop initiative with Maine. I want to just briefly end it on a question has education technology kind of delivered on the promise that you saw working with now Senator King, Governor King's time? Or are we not quite there yet?
Yeah, I think the country, I think Maine should be super proud of that initiative. And I think Maine should be even more proud of the effort that's been made to wire schools and libraries together. Maine is known as a total leader in this world. It is, whatever you think about the laptop program, it is from coast to coast, put Maine on the map in education technology, and it's something to be really, really proud of. I think, you know, the governor deserves a lot of it, the senator deserves a lot of credit for that. I think also the country deserves a huge pat on the back for the effort it's made through the E-rate program and other things to provide skill, to provide content, provide the wiring of schools and libraries together through subsidies, through the FCC and others. I think that that's been a great bipartisan success story. We are very, it is gone, my take on it is, in 20 years since like the Maine laptop program, whatever, it is moved at kind of a glacial pace until about 2 years ago, and then it just, everyone, and that's why I think it's really important that this round of ed tech companies, you'll know some of the names, General Assembly, Coursera, maybe us, you know, there's a group of like 5 or 6. They've got to get public, they've got to have big exits, they've got to do really well, they've got to create really big returns, they obviously have to do impactful work. But the problem with the ed tech space is just, it's been a really crappy place to deploy capital. And that's because there's always this is going to be the time, this is going to be the time when it's going to work. And then, you know, you go through these 5-year cycles of capital being deployed, and every 5 years you're like, okay, now it's really going to be the time. But what you wind up with is, the other thing I would say is this around ed tech, which is very interesting. Ed tech is full of thousands of companies, and the only difference between an ed tech company, why there are so many and they remain so small, is like they're like truly like cockroaches. You can't kill them. Like you can't maintain an ed, you know, like an ad tech company or like an e-commerce marketplace with $200,000 a year. But man, you can maintain a teacher dashboard company for 5 charter school networks forever. Like there will be nuclear holocaust and those companies will still be operating. And so what you wind up with is a lot of very small ed tech companies, and I think that's what we need to prove, is that we can build a couple of big ones. Because every space, it's just like every community, Maine's got to have the certifies, it's got to have, you know, it's got to have its handful every couple of years of $75 million plus exits. That's going to create wealth, it's going to create entrepreneurship, it's going to create, and so you've got to really kind of, this is kind of a game of, the funding game, I think, is kind of a game of winners. Venture funds focus on their winners, you know, the funds are determined by their winners, and communities are often determined by their winners. And DC, where I'm from, is in just a terrible downslide of exits right now, and it's had a ripple effect of entrepreneurs starting companies, and venture firms have left, almost all of them. It's really fascinating.
Wow. I would like to keep talking about this, but I think we're gonna have to wrap it.
Yeah, that was a long time. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Big round of applause.